The sun is gone. The sky is dark. The air outside finally feels cooler, but your air conditioner is still running like the afternoon never ended. You hear the compressor outside. You hear the vents pushing air through the room. You hear the thermostat click, then click again, and click again, long after the heat of the day should be over. And when a house stays hot at night, most people think the same expensive thought. Maybe the hvac is dying. Maybe the unit is too small. Maybe the system needs replacing. Maybe this is the summer where comfort turns into a bill you were not ready for. Maybe. My name is Voss, and I learned a long time ago that the loudest part of a system is not always the guilty part. Before I blame the machine, I follow the heat. Because the air conditioner makes the noise, so it gets the blame. But the quiet parts of the house may have created the load hours before the machine ever turned on. The roof did not make noise when it took the sun all afternoon. The attic did not make noise when it filled with heat. The west wall did not make noise when it absorbed the evening light. The window did not make noise when it let heat cross into the room. The ceiling above your bedroom did not make noise while it slowly warmed from above. All of them may have been loading the house like a sponge. That is how your hvac can fight the sun at night. Not because the sun is still there. Because your house may still be releasing what the sun put into it. And once you understand that, a hot room at night stops feeling random. It becomes evidence. By the end of this, I want you to be able to walk into one stubborn room after sunset and read it differently. Not just as a room that feels hot. As a room with clues. The glass. The wall. The ceiling. The timing. Side of the house the sun touched before the problem appeared. Those details can tell you whether the hvac is truly the first suspect, or whether the machine is being forced to clean up heat that entered much earlier. Think about the one room in your home that never quite relaxes. Maybe it is the bedroom at the end of the hall. Maybe it is the upstairs room. Maybe it is the room with the big window. Maybe it is the room that faces west and seems to remember every hour of the day. At 9 in the evening, the outside air finally feels softer. The driveway is cooling. The street is quiet. The sun has disappeared. But inside, the room still feels heavy. The hvac is running. Cold air may even be coming from the vent, but the room does not feel settled. It feels like the afternoon is still trapped inside the walls. That feeling matters, because in many homes, the air cools faster than the house around it. Air is light. It changes quickly. But the roof, attic, walls, ceiling, floors, furniture, glass, drywall, brick, concrete, insulation, and framing do not change as quickly. They can absorb heat slowly, hold it, and release it later. So the hvac cools the air. Then the warm surfaces feed heat back into that air. The hvac cools it again. The surfaces warm it again. And the machine keeps cycling as if it is fighting something invisible. But it is not invisible. It is just earlier in the chain. A house can behave like a heat sponge. In the morning, that sponge may be partly empty. The roof and attic have had the night to release some heat. The walls are calmer. The glass is cooler. The ceiling is not carrying as much stored warmth. Then the sun rises. At first, nothing feels urgent. The room may still be comfortable. The thermostat may barely move. The hvac may not run much at all. But outside, the roof begins taking the first hit. The attic begins warming. The sun-facing wall starts loading heat. The window glass begins passing solar energy inward. The floor near the window, the curtains, the furniture, and the inner surfaces begin collecting what the day is giving them. By mid-afternoon, the sponge is no longer empty. It is loading. By late afternoon, it may be loaded. Then sunset comes, and most people expect the house to forgive the day. But the sponge does not empty just because the sky turns dark. That delay is the part most people miss. Heat does not always arrive inside the room at the same moment sunlight hits the outside of the house. It moves through materials. It gets slowed by insulation. It lingers in attic spaces. It warms surfaces. And sometimes the most uncomfortable part reaches the room after the outside air has already started to cool. That is the turn. You are not cooling the night. You are cooling the afternoon. And if you miss that, you may spend money in the wrong place. Because if you think the room is hot because the night is hot, you blame the air. But if the room is hot because the house stored heat during the day, then the air is only part of the story. The real problem may be above your ceiling, or inside a wall, or behind a window, or in ductwork running through a hot attic, or in a surface that spent the whole day absorbing heat and is now giving it back slowly. The thermostat cannot tell you that. The thermostat is not the source of the problem. It is only the witness. It sees the temperature rise. It calls for cooling. The hvac responds. But the thermostat does not know whether the heat came through the roof, the attic, the window, the wall, the duct, the garage, or a gap nobody has checked in years. Modern comfort trains people to stare at the thermostat because the thermostat gives you a number. And numbers feel like control, so people lower the number. then lower it again, then wonder whether they need a bigger machine. But a bigger machine at the end of the chain does not always fix the beginning of the chain. That is where fear becomes expensive. When a room stays hot, the answer people are often handed first is the answer at the end of the problem. More cooling, more equipment, more power, more money. Sometimes that answer is necessary. Sometimes the air conditioner really is old, weak, dirty, poorly installed, badly sized, or in need of service. Sometimes the ducts are wrong. Sometimes airflow is poor. Sometimes humidity is making the house feel worse than the temperature suggests. But if the first answer is always the machine, you may miss the cheaper and more important question. Where did the heat enter? That question changes the whole problem. Because a machine can hide a bad heat path for a while. It can overpower it on some days. It can make the room livable. In dangerous heat, it can protect people, and that matters. But a machine cannot explain the path. It cannot tell you why the same room gets hot every evening. It cannot tell you why the ceiling feels warm after dark. It cannot tell you why one bedroom refuses to cool while the hallway is fine. It cannot tell you why the hvac is running at night like it is still noon. The house tells you that, if you know how to read it. And you do not need to start with expensive equipment to begin reading it. You can start with the room that bothers you most. First, step outside. Not for long, just enough to feel the difference. Is the air outside cooler than the room that still feels heavy? If the outside air is starting to calm down, but the room inside is still holding heat, that is the first clue. It may mean the room is not only responding to the outdoor air right now. It may be releasing heat stored earlier. That does not prove everything, but it tells you where to start. Now walk back into the problem room and notice the timing. When did this room become uncomfortable? Was it hot all day? Did it become worse in the late afternoon? Did it stay hot after sunset? Does it only happen after days of strong sun? Does it happen mostly upstairs? Does it happen mostly in one bedroom? Timing is evidence. A room that gets hot at noon is telling you one thing. A room that becomes miserable after sunset is telling you something else. The strange part is not always that a house gets hot. The strange part is when it gets hot. The second clue is direction. Which side of the house took the sun before the problem showed up? If the same west-facing room becomes uncomfortable every evening, look at what the afternoon sun touched. The window, the wall, the roof line above it, the exterior surface. Even the driveway, patio, brick, or masonry near that side of the house can hold heat and keep that area warmer. The room is not just a box. It is connected to everything around it. The third clue is surface warmth. This is where most people only check the air and miss the house. After sunset, go into the room that feels wrong and carefully compare surfaces. Feel near the inside of the window. Feel the wall that faced the afternoon sun. Feel a shaded interior wall. Feel the ceiling, especially if there is attic space above it. Feel the floor near the window. Feel the frame, the door, the surfaces that spent the day close to sunlight. You are not trying to run a laboratory test. You are building a map. If one surface still feels warmer than the others, that surface may be helping reheat the room after the hvac has already cooled the air. That is why comfort is not just temperature. Comfort is air, surfaces, humidity, airflow, and timing. The fourth clue is difference. Does the whole house feel wrong, or does one room refuse to behave? A whole house problem points one way. A single, stubborn room points another. One room may have weaker airflow. It may have a duct problem. It may sit under a hotter attic section. It may share a wall with a garage. It may face the afternoon sun. It may have missing or uneven insulation. It may have leakage paths that other rooms do not. Do not treat every hot room as the same problem. That is how money gets wasted. The heat sponge tells you what may be happening. The heat path tells you where to look. Sun to roof. Roof to attic. Attic to ceiling. Ceiling to room. Room to thermostat. Thermostat to hvac. Hvac to bill. That is one path. Another path may be sun to glass. Glass to floor. Floor to furniture. Furniture to air. Air to thermostat. Thermostat to hvac. Hvac to bill. Another path may be sun to west wall, wall to room surface, surface to air, air to thermostat, thermostat to hvac to bill. Once you see the path, the house becomes less mysterious, and when you cannot describe the path, every answer sounds expensive. But when you can describe it, the conversation changes. You can say, this room gets worse after sunset. You can say, the west wall stays warm. You can say, the vent blows cold air, but the room reheats. You can say, the ceiling under the attic feels warmer than the other rooms. You can say, the problem happens after strong afternoon sun, not just any warm day. That is not guessing. That is evidence. Now, once you find the likely path, the next question is not, what trick fixes this? That is how people create new problems. The better question is, where can I reduce the heat earlier without damaging the system? Start with the glass. If sunlight passes through a window and lands on the bed, floor, curtains, desk, or wall, that energy is already inside the room. Interior blinds can reduce glare, and they may help in some cases, but the heat has already crossed the glass. Exterior shade works earlier. A shade screen, shutter, awning, porch overhang, tree, or safe exterior covering can reduce the load before it becomes indoor heat. Same window, different timing. The hvac fights late, shade fights earlier. Then look at the ceiling. If the problem room sits under an attic and the ceiling stays warm after sunset, that is not something to ignore. The attic may be part of the heat sponge. The roof may have loaded it during the day. The ceiling may be the surface that keeps giving that heat back. An attic hatch near bedrooms or hallways can also matter. If it is poorly sealed or poorly insulated, it may become a weak point between a hot attic and the living space below. Then look at the air delivery. If the vent is blowing weakly, or the room gets less air than other rooms, the hvac may not be delivering enough cooling to that space. If ducts run through a hot attic, cooled air may be passing through a place that is already fighting against it. If ducts are leaky, damaged, poorly insulated, or badly balanced, one room can suffer while the thermostat thinks the system is doing its job. That is not always a homeowner fix. Attic vents, ductwork, electrical fixtures, insulation around recessed lights, and roof ventilation are not places for blind experiments. But knowing to look there changes the question. You stop saying, my hvac is bad. You start asking, where is the cooling being lost before it reaches this room? That is a better question. A real fix respects the whole system. A bad fix attacks one part and creates another problem. That is why I care less about the trick, and more about whether it fits the system. This is why I do not trust a method because it is old. I do not trust a method because it is cheap. I do not trust a method because it sounds clever. I trust it when the mechanism makes sense, the risk is understood, and the problem is actually the one being solved. Air conditioning matters. In dangerous heat, it can protect lives. It can make a home livable. It can be the right answer. The mistake is making it the only answer before you understand the load it is being asked to carry. The expensive answer may still be right. The hvac may need service. The ducts may need work. The insulation may be poor. The system may be badly sized. The house may need professional attention. But if you get there after following the path, you are not buying from panic. You are deciding from understanding. Modern life made the machine so central that people stopped reading the house. The machine became the answer. The house stopped being the question. And when the house stops being the question, you can spend years paying for symptoms because the entry point was never found. So let this room be the first case. Not the whole house, not every system at once, just one hot room after sunset. Tonight, do not start by lowering the thermostat. Walk into the room that still feels warm. Stand there for 30 seconds. Touch the glass. Touch the wall the sun hit. Touch the ceiling under the attic. Compare it with a shaded wall. If those surfaces are still warm after the sun is gone, you have learned something important. The room is not only hot because the air is hot. The room may be reheating itself from what the house stored. The sun left hours ago. But if the roof, attic, glass, walls, and ceiling are still giving that heat back, your hvac is not really fighting the night. It is cleaning up the afternoon. So do not begin with panic. Begin with the path. Because before you blame the machine, find where the problem entered.